I'm here talking with Stephanie.
I
I swear to God, I'm better at that. Like, I've been doing radio for years. So, okay, let's try this again. And now I'm talking with. And now,
I'm glad
right.
I'm not the only one.
All
At
right.
home, I'm like, oh.
Here we go. Turn your head and cough. It's time for your dose of Johnny C. Now, I'm doing something a little bit different. So instead of my scripted one-off 5-ish minute videos, this is a straight-up podcast. And so this is my first time, so be gentle in the comments. I wanted to do this for a long time. I'm a former radio DJ. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to grow with this thing. I'm probably going to have a lot of pregnant pauses. I am probably going to double back on things I say just because I'm a little out of practice. But what I do want to do is be informative. If you are a trivia regular of mine and you're coming here, it's like, oh, we're going to learn about cool trivia. You're going to learn something, but it's not going to be like trivia-esque. Okay, and if you're coming to me because you expect funny, we're going to have funny moments, but we're going to be talking about some serious shit. And yes, there's going to be some coarse language. So if you have a little one with you, you might want to pause for a time that they're not going to be in the room, unless you're one of those people it's like, oh, he's heard worse. In which case, by all means, please listen. Today, we're going to be talking about ADHD. And this is not going to be an ADHD-centric podcast. It's not going to be a mental health-centric podcast. I wanted to start with ADHD because I was diagnosed with it about a year and a half ago. I'd been raw dogging ADHD for about 38 years. I'd been raw dogging poor mental health for about 30 years before I started to focus on it, which we'll delve into in other episodes. But I wanted to focus on ADHD, just so and probably as an explainer on why this podcast and my mannerisms and the way I say things might be all over the place. So we're going to delve right into it. I've got 2 guests for this podcast. The first one is my best friend, Boy Scout Ben, which if you have been following my content for a long time, he and I co-hosted the douchebag videos. And if you've known me for even longer, he was my co-host for our radio morning show when we both went to UCF together, way back in the ancient early to mid 2000s. So I'm talking to him because he is an actual literal rocket scientist. He is a space systems engineer, PhD from MIT. And so I'm going to be talking to him about how he has overcome his own ADHD symptoms to get into such a place of prominence, to be able to earn a doctorate, to be able to get a master's degree. And then we're going to be talking to Stephanie Butler, licensed mental health counselor from Clarity on the Coast in Shalimar, Florida. And we're going to delve into addiction with ADHD. So first off, we're going to talk to my first guest, Boy Scout Ben. We are now talking to Dr. Boy Scout Ben, PhD, best man at my wedding, guest co-host of the old ancient 2000s Dose of Johnny C YouTube videos that have not aged well. So, by the way, dude, though the douchebag videos that we did are going to be 15 years old come Christmas time.
Don't remind me. Your 20th high school reunion's already came and passed, hasn't it?
Yeah, mine did. Mine is, and yours is next year.
Mine's next year.
Yours is next year. So yours and my wife's is next year. That's going to be fun. So this episode, we're talking about ADHD, and you have a very unique perspective of it. And I actually recall when you gave your commencement speech, when you were a guest commencement speaker, and you were talking about at the time how you were diagnosed with a debilitating mental disorder, and I just thought to myself, I'm like, what is he talking about? I'm like, it doesn't seem that debilitating. He's the smartest guy I know. And then, you like you mentioned that it's ADHD, and even at the time, I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, that can't be right, because it can't be that debilitating for you. But then and of course, come to find out that I had been raw dogging ADHD for 38 years before I was diagnosed, and you were late diagnosed, but you were diagnosed in your early 20s still. So what was it when you got your diagnosis that kind of dawned on you, like, holy shit, this explains everything?
So I don't know if I've talked to you much about all of the diagnoses I've had. So for clarification, I am certainly neurodivergent,
Yes.
and I know that labels are helpful, but they're not always right. So I like to say I have maybe what I should say is I have high functioning autism with um, sprinkles of ADHD of depression and anxiety. Again, those are labels that are good to maybe put out. But the thing about all neurodivergent people is, no two neurodivergent people are alike.
Right.
Everyone's neurodivergencies are very different. We can group people by certain sets of symptoms that allow us to sort of get a better general understanding of what they might be going through, what they might need, why they behave the certain way they are, what types of tics they have. So if you meet two people with autism, you've met two people with autism. Like
Yeah.
they're different.
You have.
But
You
yeah.
have.
So I will say when I was when I was about 32 years old, that's when I talked to a doctor about possibly being autistic. And I say that, and I'll get back to the earlier diagnosis, is because that one is still unconfirmed. Like I see a therapist who thinks my, neurodivergence can be entirely described by ADHD and a couple other things. But I'll get to that explanation why I sort of disagree. I don't go around saying, yeah, I'm autistic, everyone. It's like, that's, again, a label that's useful for me, but it's not useful for me to go around telling everyone, I guess, if that
Right.
makes sense. So
Right.
when I was, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, like, one of the symptoms of neurodivergency is going into great detail to explain to avoid misunderstanding.
Exactly.
Like, we go into excruciating detail. So okay, so what you're saying, and here's the thing, like, neither one of us are qualified to diagnose the other. I want to make that. We're going to have somebody on later who does do that, who is like an expert in their field. I wanted to talk to you about it because I wanted to talk about your own experience with neurodivergency. And also, I don't want to make this podcast like ADHD centric. There are a ton of content creators out there who make amazing ADHD neurodivergent content. I just wanted to touch on this because it hits so close to home to me. And of course, with you being my best friend, and the fact that you are, despite the struggles that you went through, and you've been through struggles, I have too. You've been able to find a prominence in your field, in your chosen field of study, and you've had to develop coping mechanisms to it. And that's what I wanted to talk to you mainly about, was your own coping mechanisms.
Sure. So the reason why I'm trying to explain two different series of diagnoses
Right.
that happen 10 years apart is to understand what it means to feel like you've been diagnosed properly. So when I was 22 years old, I was in grad school. I was struggling at that point. I had blown through high school and even college. I was in engineering. But when I got to grad school, I was struggling with a lot of things. And I was like, you know what? A lot of this might sound like ADHD. So I went to see a therapist, and the therapist was like, you're just trying to score Adderall. Here, read a book and come back to me after you read the book. And of course, reading a book, damn it. Like, he's like, read this book and come back to me in 2 weeks. I didn't start reading that book until the day before. I had to go back to see him. So the book I read was called Driven to Distraction, and then there's sort of a sequel called Delivered from Distraction. I read that book, and I only read the first half, by the way, because that's how far I got. And I was like, helping me read that book, it reminded me of different points in my life and how I felt at certain times. And what that book did for me, understanding what ADHD was linking a bunch of points as if it was a constellation, that showed, hey, this is who I am. That explains this point. That explains this point. That explains this point. So I remember being really depressed and it took me a really long time to get over a breakup because I didn't understand what happened in the breakup.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, first off, no one owes a former partner a long, detailed explanation of why they broke up with them. But sometimes it's really nice to get that explanation for self-improvement, for understanding, hey, did I do something wrong? Am I a piece of shit as a person? Or is this like a lack of attraction that suddenly faded away? It's so hard to know that. If you don't have the sensory understanding or the people skills or whatever magic bullshit it is that, neurotypical people supposedly have when it comes to reading people. Anyway, so again, 22 years old, I realized I had blown through engineering in undergrad because I didn't have to read anything. I just looked at a formula and said, oh, plug in the numbers, bam, there's my answer.
Right.
I understand it.
Because
When I got
numbers
to
came
grad
easy
school,
to
I had to
you.
read scientific papers and I would get a paragraph in and like I couldn't do anything, which is weird because I was a really big reader as a kid, read a lot of like the illustrated classics, ton of Star Wars books. Those were novels, but then when it actually got to like the technical literature, I just couldn't comprehend what was happening. And so that's originally why I sought out a diagnosis was, hey, I'm struggling in these higher level classes, but understanding that diagnosis put so many other pieces in my life together as if it was it linked so many things. And I say that linking a constellation because 10 years later, I saw a therapist. I took an autism diagnosis and I was like, okay, what does this mean? And then I read another book by a well-known author. I think her name is Temple Grand, who described what it was like to be autistic. With ADHD, it was a constellation of points. With autism, it was a zipper that wove not just those points, but every point in my life that made it was like finding a function that described the trajectory of your life in specific situations. Not just like, oh, I remember this particular memory and that was ADHD. It was all of these points together that gave me a formula for understanding who I am a little bit better. And so that's why, even though my current therapist kind of disagrees with me that I am autistic, I can relate to that flavor of autism in a way that explains a lot of my behaviors. And so, again, like I said, labels are good for yourself to understand, potentially other symptoms of what it means to be neurodivergent. So, and there's a whole lot of them. I think the best way I heard autism described was like, it's a smorgasbord. It's a buffet, all you can eat buffet, and you have a plate. How much are you going to fill up your plate? If you're neurotypical, you're still going to have some of the food at the buffet. Like you'll get a tiny little bit of peas.
Right.
So
Everyone always saying, "Oh, oh, I'm a little ADHD. Oh, I'm a little ADHD." We all exhibit those traits,
sure,
but it's when they become debilitating is when
exactly.
Yeah.
And so the reason I say that, I bring up the two stories in sequence is because one, having the autism diagnosis, it wasn't a constellation of points. It was a function. It was a line through a zipper that just like closed so many things about my relationships with other people. Well, I guess my interactions in public or with other people, just so much about the way I interact with people was better explained with an autism diagnosis than just an ADHD plus anxiety plus depression, I guess.
Right.
Those are all intermixed. But like once you start adding them up, it's like, oh no, let's take a look at the autism spectrum and say, okay, like I went to the smorgasbord. I got a little bit of auditory processing disorder. Let's get some anxiety. Let's get some depression. Let's get some ADHD. Let's pile them on next to, the fact that the most annoying sound in the world to me is middle school girls screaming over boy bands. Just absolutely hurts my ears. And like, oh wait, that's sort of that's part of auditory processing. It's like, same thing with like
screaming children for me. So
yeah. Like there are things that set you off more than other things. Everyone has stuff like that. But again, it's the abundance of all these little things that you have piled your smorgasbord autism plate with that makes other neurodivergent people worse off than neurotypical people. Neurotypical people, sure, they have some of these things. Everyone's got a little of them, but it's when it becomes debilitating that it ruins your
Yes.
relationships. It takes up, a mental and emotional toll over much longer periods of time. Sure, everyone has that incident they remember that they regret, like, oh, I was so cringe, I did a thing, I was so
Yep.
embarrassed.
Yep.
But
And it
then to
haunts you
have
like 20 years
those
later.
all the time, to think about them is one of the things that gets debilitating. It leads to more depression. It keeps you anxious. It does prevent you from sleeping at night. Like literally, everyone says, "Oh, I'm not losing sleep over it." Like I'm still losing sleep over stuff that happened to me 20 years ago,
Yep.
10 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's like it kind of piles up. And so that's sort of been my experience. Now, in terms of my understanding of, how did I get so far in life without, people telling me? Because I think I told you, I told some other friends, you know, 15 years ago, like, oh yeah, I got ADHD, and they're like, you finally just figured that out, and then stuff like that. But also, I think there's a for people who are, high functioning autistic and ADHD, they're sort of, what's the word? They cohabitate, they're codependent in a way that makes it much easier to hide how bad each one of them is to the other, because
Right.
you're using ADHD to compensate for autism. You're using autism
Well,
to
it's a Venn
compensate for
diagram. Like that's
you're
how I like to
masking.
see it. Yeah. It's a
Exactly. So
giant 3-dimensional Venn diagram.
exactly, your ability, or at least I should say, my ability to mask those symptoms was very persistent, and that's why I don't think anyone caught on to it until I caught on to it myself at the age of 22, and then later, I was in, my first long-term relationship that lasted more than like 2 years, and I was
Hmm.
still struggling to like understand what the hell was going on in my head, and that was one of the reasons why I went to see, hey, is this autism? To see another professional about what the
Yeah.
other options were for me. So, when it comes to, my experiences overall, so I've been on and off Adderall since about 2010. I took a break for like a year and a half because I sort of thought, hey, maybe now that I'm done with grad school, I don't need to be this high functioning reader. I don't need to go as deep into some subjects. But then I got to a real world job, and it was like, oh wow, I really need this. I'm not being productive enough to pass muster with this job. So that's when I got back on it. And then when I lost my job 2 years ago, health insurance ran out, and I'm like, well, screw that. I don't want to have to pay for meds. So I was off for another 6 months or so. But I was also off my anxiety, my depression meds. And like, I figure, okay, the lack of stress from not having a job means, okay, maybe I can manage. And like, yes, I could still manage raw dogging all those symptoms for months at a time. I didn't enjoy it. It's really hard to thrive when you're suffering. And so the way I see it, if it's okay for someone to get their boobs done, it's okay for me to buy serotonin from the store. Like
Right.
there are things that we do to our bodies, to ourselves, um, to make us better, to make us more of what we should be to ourselves. Some of it's, I think it's a fine line when you make that comparison, a boob job to, anxiety. One could be driven entirely by vanity. But then, there's other reasons why you might do that.
Right.
Then when it comes to medications for depression, there's still a lot of stigma about that. And that's bullshit. Why is there such stigma about trying to find something that makes you better?
Well, I mean, as men,
As men, sure.
as men, we're viewed as weak if we show any kind of vulnerability
Which,
anymore. Well, granted, it's becoming less and less stigmatized now,
yes.
but like you and I growing up in the 90s, we were still picked on. We were still, like if we showed any kind of vulnerability, never let them see you sweat, never let them see you cry
Yeah.
or anything like that. That's when it becomes very debilitating. Like, you have to hide your symptoms. Now, granted, like I grew up in a household, it's like, oh, like you shouldn't have to hide your feelings, express your feelings, express your feelings. Well, then, but that was one of those things that was, it's like, well, now I don't want to. It's like, it's okay, you can do it. I don't want to now.
Well, I think for someone like me, it was, I have these feelings and I have no way to express them.
Right.
It's possible, yes, there's some element of toxic masculinity that has prevented me from doing that, but then there's also all these other things. So it's not just society. There is, I get frustrated a lot when I struggle to interpret my emotions. And I think that's
Right.
another symptom of that is more on the autism spectrum than it is the ADHD spectrum, where I don't understand what I'm feeling. And whether it's that feeling or the lack of understanding causes me to get really frustrated and angry at myself.
I would say now here's the thing. Let me preface this really quick. I actually got screened for autism. And according to the screening, I didn't meet the markers or whatever. They also said that I could have met the markers when I was a child and come up with enough coping mechanisms as an adult to where like I was able to mask it well enough and and kind of work my way around it. So, like balls kind of still up in the air with that one. But with ADHD, like I took a 567 question psych eval, 2 20-minute auditory and visual stimuli tests, and sat through all that, and they said, no, you have ADHD. And this was like all after being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So that's the preface, also over explaining. But I want to get to I think folks with ADHD, I have a hard time expressing like how I feel about things, but at the same time, like I can be extremely insightful on how someone else is feeling. Like, okay, you're expressing yourself this way, so you must be feeling this way. And more times than not, they're like, oh my God, you get it. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. But I can remember one specific time, my wife and I are at the Disney World Food and Wine Festival, and our friends, I was planning on like going to the steakhouse that night, and I love steak. And our friends and I were like planning on going to the steakhouse. And the thing is like during the Food and Wine Festival, there were a lot of places where like I could stop and eat steak and eat steak and eat steak. And then they changed the plan to go to somewhere else that didn't have steak. And I just got I just got so frustrated. I stood like I froze. And my wife looked at me and she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I can't really describe it without sounding petty and selfish and stupid. And she says, just say it. And I said, well, I know that I've already had steak, but I still want steak, but I shouldn't want steak because because I've already had steak. And so I shouldn't want it. But like, I feel judged that I still want it, even though I've already had it all day. And I feel judged for like being angry that I won't get to have it at the end of the day. But it was one of those that I had to spell it out. Because also being neurodivergent, all of these thoughts and feelings and instances are processed within an instant. They're processed within an instant, and then we're asked to explain it.
Yeah.
And then we have to go back. It's kind of like in math class, going back and showing your work.
Kind of. And that's a two-way street, because my ADHD brain, like my head will bounce topic. And I feel like among people with ADHD, I have a strange gift of being like, I can take that train all the way back to the last car and be like, hey, how did I get to this topic up here? Oh, I thought of this, then I thought of this, then I thought of this, then I thought of this. A lot of people with ADHD can't do that. But when it comes to emotions, that's a much harder train to follow from start to finish.
Yes.
Because it's sort of like with my ADHD train, I can see all those cars, I can see all those thoughts. With the emotional one, it's like walking through blindfolded.
Yeah.
It's like trying to count how many chairs are in each train car you pass.
Yeah.
And you can't even, you don't have any sight there. So
and how you felt this way and like what made you feel this way and all that stuff.
And well, even describing that feeling, I felt that way. Well, what does that even mean? What is that feeling? If you can't even describe the feeling or understand the feeling, that's what makes it so much harder to make those steps. So I think you brought up a good point earlier too about, you and I would say are I don't want to say more empathetic. I know there's a little bit of a, not a stigma, a misunderstanding about people with autism and neurodivergence, that they're not as empathetic. And there certainly are branches, like I said, it's a spectrum. Some people
Yeah.
are not very empathetic. Some people are hyper empathetic. I think you and I
Right.
fall closer to hyper empathetic, which
Yes.
makes
Yeah,
it
very much
harder
so.
because we want to help other people
Yes.
without even knowing how we're supposed to help ourselves, or
Yep.
not knowing that it's not appropriate to try to help someone else at a certain situation.
Right, right. And then, of course,
And
you
so
overanalyze, and then
that's
you want to help, like you feel guilty for not helping. And then, of course, like if you're the reason that they're feeling bad, you want to make it right, and you try desperately to make it right.
right.
And I want to again preface this with, like, if there's anybody with neurodivergency who's listening to this, it's like, oh, that's not my experience at all. We're just talking about our own experiences.
Yes.
So we're not trying to generalize. We're not trying to generalize. We're not trying to, like, say that this is it.
Yeah.
Because it is a spectrum.
Yeah.
ADHD and autism.
Try to box things in
Right.
without completely binning them in. These are
Yes,
broad,
and
fuzzy labels.
it's very broad, fuzzy labels. Well, I think so. Also, like a lot of these content creators that I've been following that kind of help me cope. It's like, oh, like putting labels on things. I think, at least for me, it helps just because, like, it says, oh, I have this. Oh, this, it's like opening a box and saying, oh, like this is all the things that happen with me, and like, oh, open up another box. Oh, well, this doesn't really work or anything like that. So one of the things that was like kind of a make or break for me was I followed this one ADHD content creator who straight up said, I hate it when people call having ADHD a superpower, because it minimizes the struggles that you go through with ADHD. And I wholeheartedly disagreed with that. Now, granted, that's probably the experience for other people, but I don't like to think of it as minimizing it. I like to think of it as, I have to think about the positives that come with, like, why my brain is the way that it is, and the positives of, me being able to do things that neurotypicals can't do, or it's harder for them to do. I try to think of that sort of as the trade-off for all the bullshit I have to go through in a typical day. Like, not cleaning, like not cleaning my house. I'm terrible at cleaning my house, but it's not because, oh, you have to do the dishes. It's not just doing the dishes. It's going in, and each step is a task. Each dish is a task. Okay, well, this is crusted on, so I got to wipe things this way, and then I got to put it away. Oh, wait, the dishwasher's not empty. I got to empty the dishwasher first. Oh, wait, I can't empty the dishwasher first without unpacking all of this stuff out of the cabinet. All sorts of shit, and it's just one step after the other, and it's step after step after step after step, and it's things that you can easily miss, and it completely derails your entire task as a whole. That's the biggest struggle that I have. And, of course, that's also the biggest trouble I've had with content creation for the last few years, which is why I'm trying to get off my ass and do it. And one of the ways I'm doing it is interviewing you, body doubling. So,
awesome.
So
I'll say
go ahead.
One thing I want to add to that chain of every single one of those steps, not only is every setback frustrating, but then you start to feel the shame of, why couldn't I fix that? Why did I make the mistake? Or why did that setback set me back so much? It wasn't that big of a setback. Oh, there's extra elbow grease I got to put in this. 5 seconds of work, but like, you can leave dishes in there for weeks. Like, that's the other thing. So I will say I disagree with you, and I agree with that other content creator, but I understand where you're coming from. Like, I do not view ADHD as a superpower, but it does come with its benefits in a way. Like, I see where that is.
Like, I see it more as, like, there are superpowers that come with it as a trade-off for the weaknesses that, like, it's like ADHD in and of itself, not a superpower, but it comes with certain abilities.
Yeah.
And, kind of like in D&D, where you have X amount of charisma, but you have to trade off an X amount of, like, strength or whatever. I'm a bad nerd. I don't play D&D, but
Constitution is what you're thinking.
I'm sorry?
Trade off Constitution.
Yeah, straight. So, but it's a very it is debilitating, but at the same time, like, and I tell my wife all the time, every time I make a mistake or like every time I leave something open, I'm like, I hate my brain, I hate my brain, I hate my brain. My wife's like, I love your brain. And, like, it's the same brain that allows me to be able to host trivia 4 nights a week. It allows me to have gone into, the audiovisual technology of it all and like being able to produce something like this with ease. Being able to edit videos like in an almost instant. Like I can offer same day video because I can look at an editing sequence. I can look at certain shots and be like, okay, I can fit this part right here. I know where this is going to go, like as I'm shooting it. So like those are the things that I look back at, because otherwise, if I don't look at those, then I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? You know?
And like I certainly feel you on that, because one of the things, so I'm a space systems engineer. My job is to think about all the different things and how they all fit together. Interfaces, understanding dependencies, putting so many things together in ways that other people know they need to go together, but how are they going to interact? How are they going to, screw each other up if it's not done right? So I think that does help me in my job, in what I do, the ability to bounce around and say this, and draw these maps of things that make no sense to other people when you just like look at them on screen, but then it's got all the information that's conveyed in there. I'm really good at drawing diagrams, and making those visual connections for other people. So that's something, that has been something that has helped me. Struggling with some of those problems and making it and communicating that information is something that is a problem for me, because I'll have an idea and in my head it's perfectly clear, but I'm not necessarily good at putting that into words, and I'm not that good of an artist. Like there's a lot of skill that goes into art, and I don't have that skill. If I was a better artist, I'd probably be visual artist, I should say.
Visual arts, yeah. I was gonna say you're a damn musician, dude.
Like, I'm a musician, yes, but that's not what I'm talking about. So I will say that's where the quote unquote superpower of ADHD has helped me.
Yes. So now we were talking about coping mechanisms. What were some coping mechanisms that you didn't realize were coping mechanisms pre-diagnosis?
Leg bounce. Leg bounce.
Well, no, I meant like just kind of like keeping you on task. Keeping you on task, like being able to set a schedule for yourself, like pre-diagnosis, and then being able to look back and be like, oh, I was able to utilize that, and now I can continue to utilize that. And then what were some things that you discovered post-diagnosis that you're like, okay, well, this didn't help me then, but maybe this other thing will help me now?
Yeah. So I will say, fear was a big one. I was scared to get B's.
Same.
I was a straight A student.
Girl, same.
So I think that fear is a strong motivation. And I know other people with ADHD, or who were, they were smart, but they didn't apply themselves in class. They just didn't care what their grades were. I think that was a powerful motivator for me to stay on task, do my homework. I was able to do my homework very quickly. Therefore, it didn't take too much effort to do a lot of my homework. So it was less of a task. It was less of a chore to do homework, because it was never hard for me. So in that way, there's a lot of these stories about people with ADHD, or just, people in high school breezing through high school, and they get to college and they just fail. I got through college and got to grad school and was doing pretty well, except for a few classes.
Right.
That were not the standard type of class that I was used to taking. And that's where I was struggling. So it wasn't even failure. It was just, I just realized this shouldn't be so damn hard. I have to read a 10-page paper and talk about it at class. This shouldn't be difficult. And it
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Well, but that's also part of the shame that's associated with it. It's, like I was told all my life. Just to kind of preface it, like, and I'll concede, Ben's like, you could drive a railroad spike through Ben's temple for me to even beat him at checkers, but he's like super genius. Me, I did graduate top of my class in high school, got a full ride through college, through undergrad. But, I was told, it's like, well, you're so smart. Why can't you do this? Why can't you do this? It's like, you're such a genius at this. Why can't you do something so simple as this? Like when I was in my media production class, I'm like, I loved compositing shots. I loved editing. But when it came time for me to decorate the set, I'm like, no. It's like, well, you're an artist. You can do that because, I could draw. It's like, well, you're an artist. Why don't you have this artistic eye for this? And I'm like, because I have all these things and it's overwhelming. I'm like, what do I do with all of these things?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of shame that comes with it.
Yeah.
But actually, I breezed through undergrad. But by the time I got done with undergrad, I got burnt out. I wanted to go to grad school, but I got burnt out. And it got to a point like my major was so easy because I was I was already working in that field before I even took that major. So like undergrad for me was a breeze. The hardest part was my history minor, but I was able to bullshit my way through that. I think the lowest grade I got was a C, but by the time I got done, because my senior year I took like 18 or 21 hours worth of courses both semesters, and I just got burnt out. I was like, I'm done. Like grad school's gonna suck. I'm not. No, just no. But for you, you were able to. So what you're saying is, by the time you got to grad school, it was difficult. The difficulty started showing up.
Yes. So I guess one thing I want to point out, though, one of the things I'm terrible at is accepting compliments. So that's something I've learned is like, oh, that might be one of those autism symptoms. It's like, what's the most awkward thing? I mean, there's lots of awkward things, but one of the most awkward things is
like me just now calling you a genius. So
yes, exactly. But one of the most awkward things in the world is when it's your birthday and everyone's singing you happy birthday. What are you supposed to do?
You're not supposed to sing to yourself.
What do I do with my hands? Everyone's looking at me. I don't like this. I think pre-diagnosis, one of my coping mechanisms was to stay busy.
Yes.
Was to do so much and have so many extracurricular activities and not be alone with my thoughts, I guess was one way to put it.
Okay.
I guess so. I know, like, my junior year at college was probably the time in my life where I felt the most fulfilled and was the most busy. Like I was doing stuff every day. I was in classes. I was in extracurriculars. I had friends. I was like, that was when I was the most on fire and doing the most. And maybe that burned me out a little bit, but I felt like I was at my highest there,
right?
Because of all the things I was doing. And so, senior year, I sort of cut back intentionally so I could focus on, senior design project. And that's when I feel like depression started creeping in. And then I moved to grad school where there was, a lot more work and a lot less extracurriculars. And also like seasonal depression. I moved to Massachusetts and it was like, oh, this is what March is like in Massachusetts. It's terrible. So like, I think I tend to, everyone looks at the past with rose colored glasses.
Rose tinted.
College is when I think I don't want to say I peaked, but like, that's when I emotionally was probably at my highest. I definitely don't remember being depressed that year in particular. I remember being depressed in high school and early college, but not so much that year.
Senior year of college for me, because we were, I was involved in extracurriculars. Like we did a radio show together. That's how we know, like that's how we became friends.
That was good times.
When we were, and I remember, I hated, like I wanted to do a morning show and then I immediately regretted it because I had to get up at 7 a.m. Granted, most radio morning shows start at like 6 a.m., but it's college. Like we weren't even allowed in until 8 a.m. And, like, and that's when 8 a.m. classes start. And I'm like, why did I do this? But it got me up, it got me out the door.
And I honestly, I think you are a big part of the reason why I was successful my first 2 years of college. Because
see, I can't accept that compliment, dude.
Sure, but I'm telling you that got me onto a routine, because routines are the hardest thing to get. And I think that goes back to what we were saying about empathy and shame. Because you asked me to be on that show, I knew I had to be there at 8 a.m.
Yep.
It wasn't, I told myself that I had to be there, because I'm not listening to myself. That guy's a bastard.
Right.
But
Same.
you were my friend and you wanted me to be there for that show.
Yeah.
That helped me build that routine. It is impossible for me to build a routine based off my needs.
Yeah. Well, and that's where body doubling comes in.
I will drop everything to help a friend.
Yes.
In a way that helps. So honestly, I'm dead serious. That show probably helped me as a coping mechanism more than anything else.
Oh, I appreciate that.
At home, high school, I had my parents to wake me up, kind of thing. I hadn't, alarm clock's one thing. Like, I got a bus to catch. Like, when you're in college, it's not the same at all. Like, having the
self-discipline
clock needs to show up. 7:30 classes also were terrible, but they kept me from free cycling my sleep schedule.
Yes.
So again, that is not exactly what you would call a coping mechanism, but it was a structure. And I think, people with ADHD, or at least me in particular, I should say, I hate structure, but I need it.
Yes.
Building structure in my life is a habit, and forming habits is incredibly hard for me.
Yep.
I
thrive on chaos.
Yeah, I thrive on chaos. I love not knowing what the hell I'm doing tonight. Like, oh, where's the party? I don't know.
Yep.
What's going to happen? For me at my new job, I at my last job, I was doing pretty well. I had to, I sort of showed up between 8:30 and 9 a.m. And then the pandemic happened. And suddenly I got to work from home. And for the first 2 months, it was great because there was no structure. I didn't have to get on the metro. I didn't even have to put a suit on. I didn't wear pants half of that time. But then after the first 2 months, like, reality hit, and like, it was terrible. And so for the next year, my job performance, like, kind of suffered as a result. I am not the kind of person who can work from home. And I love everyone who can, because that means you're not, you have more of your life. And now my new job, I have to go into the office every day, and that's good for me. So building structure in a way that is thrust upon you, forcing some other person's or entity's structure to be on you, is better than trying to build your own structure. Oh, get a daily planner, write a task list.
I mean,
that all sucks. It never works.
I live and die by my phone calendar because I have to, but
and I will say, digital assistants have made that building your own structure so much easier, because you hit a button, you say, Google, put this on my calendar, done. I don't have to get out a pen. Where's my calendar? My hand is already cramping because I type everything. Every little thing, when it comes to anyone who tells an ADHD person, oh, just write a task list, the act of writing those tasks is almost just as much of a task.
Yes, it's tedious, like sitting there, like even typing it out, like, or typing it on your phone. Like, at the very least, like, voice recognition is getting better to where, like, if you just say it out loud, your phone can pick up your voice, to where it's just a very simple, my phone's right here. So, like, I can't say hey and then SIRI, which, by the way, it took me longer than I'm proud of to realize that I could set reminders with it. But then when I found out, it was like a godsend. But also, like, going back to the radio show, I think also it was one of those things where, see, I depended on you, but at the same time, like, I knew that I'm the one who put you up to this, so I owed it to you to actually show up and come to these things. Like, I remember coming in with laryngitis one damn day because, because I had to let you in, actually. It's because I had to let you into the studio.
Yeah, I just made fun of you the whole time because you couldn't talk back. It was great. That was a great episode. One thing I want to talk about is the ADHD tax.
Yes.
It is expensive in more ways than one to have ADHD.
Yes.
If I go to the store and I buy fresh vegetables, I might eat one or two of whatever I have and then forget about it. and
They
I
rot.
lose the fresh vegetables. Or I could buy a smaller container of pre-chopped vegetables that cost $2 more, and I'll eat them all. Either way, I'm paying extra money for something I'm not consuming because of my ADHD. And so you can either pay the tax up front or you could pay it at the back end. It's hard to tell which one is the right way to do it, to do the, economies of scale or whatever, but that is something that I've learned to accept better is, hey, I'm going to waste some money for stuff that I'm going to forget. Just get over it. Stop
And
being ashamed when my apples go bad. Stop being ashamed when
oh man, that was a
I forget
bad point.
about my coffee and then I have to put it in the microwave for the third time. Like, yep, that's
Yep.
power that I'm wasting.
Yep.
But that's a
Or
very
washer dryer, like having to rewash your clothes. Too lazy, like, or I'm sorry, I don't like using the term lazy, but oh, I bought something wrinkle free. I don't want to have to go through the process of actually ironing. I just run it through the dryer, which takes up a lot more electricity.
Yep.
For me, it's not I just don't buy vegetables. Like I use avoidance, so I don't
Yeah.
buy vegetables. Hence why I'm almost 300 pounds. I say almost 300 pounds. I'm 275, but the tax that I pay for that is, being winded, a lot more easily. Granted, I can still function pretty well, but also having to buy overpriced supplements to make up for the nutrients that I don't get when all I do is eat meat and starchy stuff. And it's not that I don't like vegetables, it's just that I don't think to eat them. I don't, and like you, like I would buy, a thing of salad. I'd probably take out a little bit, eat that, and then forget about it the rest of the week.
Yep.
And so I just don't do it because I know that it's going to be a waste of money.
Yeah.
But you're
And
absolutely right.
I know people are real big on meal prep Sundays. That is the worst thing I can
It
think of.
is. Oh God, no. Like that's
congratulations to you if you can do that, but
no.
hey.
Just no, I can't. It's not like it's being productive, but it's not being sexy productive. It's not, oh, I'm going to create this or, oh, hey, I'm going to complete this series. It's like, no, I have to spend like 2 to 3 hours preparing for things in order for me to function. That's not sexy.
Not cool.
That's not sexy. All right. Well, Ben, you sexy beast, thank you so much for being a part of the first ever Dose of Johnny C podcast. Our next guest is going to be coming up soon. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what I actually do for a living. So now's the part of the podcast where I actually talk about what I do for a living to earn money so that I can actually do things like this in my free time. So I'm a trivia host, if you were not aware of that already. I host in the Northwest Florida area, and so I host it 4 nights a week at various places. So on Monday nights, I host at Fat Boys in Crestview, Florida, starting at 6 p.m. I host at Hammock Bay Freeport at the Props in Hammock Bay on Tuesday nights, starting at 6. I host at the Boardroom in downtown Fort Walton Beach, Florida, on Wednesday nights, starting at 7 p.m. Central Time. And I host at Crooked Tail, my flagship trivia, and I host there on Thursday nights, starting at 6 p.m. So if you're interested in trivia, by all means, please come play. It's a lot of fun. And if trivia is your thing, then please come play. So you can also follow me on all of my socials, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and of course, this podcast is on YouTube. So you can follow all of my content on all of these platforms at Dose of Johnny C, which is mine, and my company, Ace 50 Media, which is what is powering this podcast. So check out all of these platforms. And also, if you want exclusive info on trivia nights, be sure to check out Dose of Johnny C's fan club on Facebook groups. Join the fan club, and you'll be first to know when trivia nights are happening, what themes are going to be happening. So be sure to check that out and join the fan club on Facebook groups. And now back to the topic at hand, ADHD. So we talked with Boy Scout Ben, and now we're going to be talking with licensed mental health counselor Stephanie Butler from Clarity on the Coast, which is out of Shalimar, Florida. She has a practice. We're going to be talking about ADHD and addiction. I'm now talking with Stephanie Butler of Clarity Counseling and Wellness from Shalimar, Florida. and we're discussing ADHD. And you're a licensed mental health counselor and therapist. And so we're discussing ADHD. I know that your area of expertise is addiction studies as well, correct?
Yes.
All right. So why don't we delve into that before we delve into like a lot of the other stuff, like the stuff I experience. I'm like the only thing that I'm addicted to is poker.
Okay.
Not really though. So, but anyway, so ADHD and addiction. Would you say? And please correct me if I'm wrong. Like a lot of kids from the 90s, from when we were growing up, a lot of kids were overdiagnosed. And of course, now people are saying, oh, adults are overdiagnosed with ADHD. But basically, the kids who, quote unquote, didn't behave in school, it's like, oh, he has ADHD. Let's pump him full of Ritalin or Adderall or anything like that. Would you say that from that growing up, that leads to further addiction?
That's a wonderful question. Johnny,
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
I'm glad that you decided to come on. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. So, yes, my area of expertise is addiction.
Okay.
And with addiction, what I love so much about it is I see so much. Addiction is a symptom of so much greater. And there's so much underneath. And ADHD is usually part of the underneath. Like if you think of an iceberg, you think of the addictive symptoms. People are seeking treatment for addiction, and then they come to therapy and not even thinking about, oh, hey, I had an ADHD diagnosis when I was younger. How is this impacting me now? And it's always really surprising to me when we start, to dig and like unpack that underneath there has at some point been an ADHD diagnosis. And for the 80s and 90s kids, you're absolutely right. Something was wrong with them. So from a young age, they were not accepted. They were different. They were other. And I see the way that that's impacted them, years later, in their life, struggling to cope, struggling to fit in. I've seen how it's affected their self-esteem. Absolutely, there's a connection, and I see it all the time.
Yeah. Would you also say that it might have to do with, like from what I've seen? Again, I'm no expert. Like I have ADHD. Like I know from my own experience, and of course, like from what my therapist has talked to me about, and all the other doctors that I've had, impulse control.
Yes.
Like impulse control, like it leads to addiction. Like it's like, oh, dopamine. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do what I want when I want, and consequences be damned.
Yes, exactly. Yep, they go hand in hand. So if your brain is already primed to have an impulse issue, right, or a deficit in dopamine, or just the way that it's appropriated in your brain, then yes, it's a setup. So it's a genetic setup, unfortunately. And then you're learning something's wrong with you, and addiction helps you fit in. It helps your brain feel quote unquote normal, like, oh, this is the way most people feel, and so that just further reinforces, that social aspect of, hey, I'm better at socializing, at communicating, I can fit in. And then also, from a young age, if kids are given a pill, they can't help but learn, hey, I need something in order to make me normal.
Yes.
Or to fit in. So there's so much overlap between addiction and ADHD.
Yeah. Now, like I actually consider myself lucky. So, like I myself, I was diagnosed at a very late age, like a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
I was basically I found out that I had been raw dogging ADHD since I was 38 years old.
Wow.
So it was a unmedicated. Well, so a few years before I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so I was taking mood stabilizers. Before that, they said, "Oh no, you have depression." I was taking antidepressants while I'm bipolar disorder, and then another counselor friend of mine said, "No, from what you've described to me, you have bipolar disorder, and you need to take something different because you're taking a stimulant now." And so then I changed. By the way, I was taking Lexapro, or no, I was taking what was it? I was taking the I forget what it was. It wasn't Lexapro. It was Effexor. It was Effexor. I was taking Effexor, maximum dosage, and like that, and of course, like I was told, no, you need to come off of that, and like even trying to wean off of it had very bad withdrawal symptoms.
Yes.
Brain shocks.
Yep.
All sorts of stuff. That
Oh,
again,
yeah.
my experience. And then like moving on to the mood stabilizers, it was absolute hell. It was hell on my brain. It was hell on all that. The mood stabilizers helped, but and then of course I went to therapy for the bipolar disorder. I actually got screened for ASD. They said I didn't meet the markers for it, but taking a Knockenbach test, it showed that I had a lot of ADHD symptoms. I'm like, okay, well, let's delve into this then. And then sat down, and of course, for someone with ADHD, it's very hard to sit down and take a 567 question psych evaluation on top of 2 20-minute auditory and visual stimuli tests.
Oh, you had the whole thing.
Yeah, I had the whole thing, and they said, no, you have ADHD.
Yep.
And you can have bipolar disorder with it. You can have generalized anxiety with it. And so, like, I got all the things. And who I talked to, and I said, I don't want stimulants. I don't want stimulants because I've had stimulants. It turned me into, by the way, you can be frank here. You're allowed to be frank here. It turned me into grade A asshole, like being on stimulants. And so I said, I don't want to be on stimulants. And they actually recommended medical marijuana.
Okay.
And so that's what I take. That's, again, my own experience. Like, I'm not going to say, hey, this should be good for you. Everybody's different, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm hogging the conversation here.
Yeah.
But the point that I was getting to, ADHD train of thought, was I consider myself fortunate that I didn't turn to alcoholism, that I didn't turn to drug addiction. I didn't try marijuana until I actually started taking medical marijuana. Like as your brain's developing. And of course, like taking these kinds of drugs at such a young age while your brain's developing can be bad.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is. It seems extremely overwhelming. What do you do if you've got a kid that's struggling in school and schools aren't set up for, these types of, the buzzword is neurodivergence. It's like, what do we do? The system isn't set up for that.
Correct.
And it's not just ADHD kids. I mean, there are highly sensitive children. There are autistic children that are quote unquote high functioning that can pass as neuronormative. And so it's like, what do you do? And it just seems super overwhelming because I feel like it's a system issue. Everybody, like you said, everybody's experience is different. When it comes down to medicating your child, I mean, that's a really tough decision.
It is
one that has to be considered. It's not just a light decision.
Yeah. And so, but I consider myself fortunate that I did not go into substance abuse, and I was able to see what substance abuse did to other folks.
Yeah.
But, and like, luckily that didn't happen for me. But impulse control is a really bad thing. Like, I had to rein in spending. Like, I put myself in debt quite often. But here's the thing, is like, there's a lot of crippling things that happen with ADHD. Your lack of impulse control, forgetting what you're doing as you're doing it, forgetting items, people can, and then of course the shame that comes with it, people calling you careless, people calling you like, saying that you don't care. Your inattentiveness is your weakness.
Lazy.
Lazy. Oh yeah. The therapist that I talked to said, I don't like the word lazy because it's, instead it's, and see, that's part of it. Executive dysfunction. It's like, it's not that we're lazy. It's not that we don't want to do these things. We know we have to do these things, but it's a form of paralysis.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be sitting there scrolling, knowing I have 1,000 things to do. Like yesterday, setting up this studio so it's camera ready for you. Knowing that I had to do it, and getting to the point where it was, okay, no, this is something I have to do. And if anything, thanks to you being in here, it actually motivated me to clean my studio a little bit. There's still some mess back there.
I won't look.
But that's also a form of body dumbling. Like, it was like, okay, it's not important enough for me, but it's important enough for the person that I'm going to be in here. Like, I didn't want this to look like a mess to you or anything like that. So, but there's the shame that comes with it. And it's debilitating. But also, there are a lot of advantages that come with this. For example, like, I had the ability to, like, when I was on a high, when I was on a hyper focus, build this whole thing, this whole room in a month.
Wow.
So, but there are folks, and like, I like to consider that my superpower. Do I say that ADHD overall is a superpower? Absolutely not. But there are folks out there who say that ADHD, you can't say that ADHD is a superpower because it minimizes the struggles. And I'm like, no, I don't think of it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it like ADHD comes with its advantages. It comes with these special powers that you said neuronormative. Is that what you called it?
That's what I said.
So I've always heard neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
That neurotypicals either have more difficulty doing or just don't think to do,
Mm-hmm.
seeing patterns, all that kind of stuff. Like, I have those abilities to be able to do all of this in a short amount of time. So I consider that the positive trade-off to all the debilitating shit that I go through.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your opinion on that?
My opinion on that. Okay. So I think, attention deficit, going back to what you were saying earlier, the information that we know now, really has shed so much light on what people are going through. Like
Yes.
80s and 90s, we didn't know the medication, you were labeled. And I think now what we're seeing is it was, labeled attention deficit. But is it really a deficit, or is it just the way that the attention is appropriated? Right? And so it's like a deficit means there's something wrong with you.
Yes,
You don't
yes.
have enough of it. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I sure have enough of it when I'm hyper-focused on something.
Yes,
So-
exactly. Well, and so I've actually heard it called something else now. Like the term attention deficit implies that you're lacking attention. No,
Yeah.
it's not that you're lacking attention. It's that everything is trying to grab your attention all
Yes.
at once, and you cannot focus.
Right.
If anything, it's a deficit of it's a regulatory deficit.
Yeah, choice paralysis.
Yeah, choice paralysis. But there's something that I saw, and again, like, I have you here to correct me, like, because like, the term "doing your own research" is just a bad thing to say, because it's like, but it's like you did your own research, but you did like 10 minutes or like an hour worth of research, as opposed to someone who's like gotten their master's degree, done, hours and hours and hours of coursework, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So, but there's something that I read. It was called, we shouldn't call it ADHD anymore. It should be
Mhm.
called VAST, Varied Attention Stimulus Trait.
Oh, I like that. I have not heard that.
Yeah.
And I do like that.
Yeah.
Because
So-
it's easier to digest than, hey, there's something wrong with you, and it's even in the name.
Yeah.
Right.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Yes.
And, like hyperactivity, it's the kids who don't behave. And
yes.
there's so I'm trying not to reference like specific movie or TV show titles, because we're still in the middle of a writers and actor
Yes.
strike.
Mhm.
But there is one particular animated series that's been going on for 25 years that uses little paper cutouts, and they actually talked about ADHD, and they put all these kids on like Adderall and Ritalin, and like they were just completely in a fog. But it's like, no, there's a simple method to ADHD, and it's like this teacher saying, "Sit down and shut up," and then they just do it. Of course, that was back in the 90s.
Right.
And obviously, what we know in the 90s doesn't apply now.
It was only
30
10
years
it was
later.
10, no, it was only 10 years ago.
Right?
It was only
Right.
10 years ago. Yeah, no, but I feel like, with a lot of mental illness issues, it's what can we do to make you easier for other people to handle, not what we can do to help your experience. And I see there's a shift. I wish it would get here faster.
Right.
But I think, to really just dumb down your issues to make someone else's life easier is devastating, and I've seen that clinically. I do like the perspective of seeing it as a superpower if that resonates with you. Like we
Yes.
said, if that resonates with you, that can be a really good way to shift your perspective. I do that with anxiety as well. If you're going to have these things, right? If you're going to live with anxiety, if you're going to live with ADHD, it's so easy to hyper-focus on the negative. I can't believe I have this. It's not fair. I'm not like other people. I can't do what I want to do. I'm this, I'm that. Okay, that may all be true, but it can also be true that you have unique traits and characteristics in addition to all of that other stuff. And it can help balance it. If you're going to look at the negative, challenge yourself to look at the positive.
Yes.
Telescope out and see that there are things about it that are helpful. ADHD brains are extremely creative.
Yes.
They think completely differently. Some of the most creative people that we know are not neurotypical.
Right.
Right. And so once you're ever involved in this community, right, you're like, oh, I don't ever want to go back. I don't ever want to try to feel like I'm typical. I'm not.
Yep. And I mean, like, I was picked on in school because, like, I was loud. I was obnoxious. I was or it came off as loud and obnoxious. I'm like, no, I'm just really happy or really enthusiastic about things. Even in my adult life, some jobs that I've had, it's like, oh, dude, be cool.
Yeah,
Be
you're
cool.
too much.
You're too much. You're a bit much.
Oh.
Yeah, you're a bit much. Or
what does that even mean?
I actually did a podcast with my former class president from my high school. And we were talking, and he straight up said to me, he said, and we were in high school. We'd known each other since we were 5. And we were in our media production class. Obviously, I turned that into something.
Yes, you did.
But I was constantly held back, not held back like in school or anything like that. But like I'd have all these ideas, and but I would spitball them like da 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 da. And the guy who was like basically running the class, who was also our class president, he said, "I just didn't know how to handle your energy.
Okay.
I didn't know how to handle it." And I mean, it's very, like now looking back, it's like, okay, I can understand that. I look back at old home movies, and I saw an old home movie where like it was my dad's birthday, and we're all gathered around. He's opening his presents and everything like that, and I see myself with a toy truck in hand. I'm like 9 years old, and I'm rolling it on his face. And I look back, and I'm like, if that was my kid, I would be so annoyed by it. And of course, and I say the word annoyed because one of the worst things you can say to someone who is neurodivergent is you're annoying.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
I have been told I'm annoying. I've been told I'm unbearable
Oh my
at
goodness.
times. And again, and here's the thing is like, there's a reason I work for myself now.
Right.
And it's because,
Me too.
yeah, right, right. Isn't it great?
Yes.
But there's a reason I work for myself now. And it's because that way I don't have to answer to anybody who supposedly can't handle my energy.
Sure.
And, like it comes off as arrogant. And that's the other thing. I can't tell. There are things like, I can't tell if I am coming off as, like, I can read people and I can tell that they're annoyed with me, but I can't understand why they're annoyed.
Got it. Yeah.
And I have to ask. And of course, then they're exalted. It's like, well, if you have to ask, that's even worse. And,
oh man.
but I'll be like, well, what did I do? And it's like, well, you were condescending. I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be condescending. I didn't intend to be condescending. Or, like I'm saying, oh, this is a flex. I have to preface it with, I'm very happy with this.
Sure.
I want to tell you about it, but
Yeah.
now I'm being arrogant.
Oh man. So it's
You
like,
know.
well, you're either too much or you're not enough. What is it?
Yeah, exactly. and of course, that leads to shame, that leads to depression, it leads to self-loathing,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And actually, there was another. I can mention the actor. His name is Ahmad Best. He played one of the most hated characters in a beloved science fiction franchise, which you can see decorated all over my room. He was in the first, in episode 1 of that franchise, and the hate that he got for it because he put so much of himself into that character,
Mm-hmm.
and it drove him to self-harm or the desire to self-harm.
Sure.
And I could relate so hard with it. And the thing is like, I hated that character too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, now I just want to give him a hug and be like, I'm so sorry.
Right.
Because like that fan base is also one of the most toxic fan bases. And we will acknowledge that.
Really.
Because, we have expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just very, and again, it leads to, and I believe also, going back to addiction, the shame that comes with neurodivergency, with ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
the How are you so careless?
Yep.
How can you forget something like that? You're so smart. Why can you do like all of these things, but you can't do something as simple as clean your kitchen?
Yeah.
The shame that comes with it, the pain that comes with that shame, it makes you want to numb that pain.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you get that and you're getting it at home, at school, with your friends, I
Yep.
mean, it's not like just one part of your life. It's everywhere. Something must be wrong with you. Okay, well, I guess something's wrong with me if all these people are mirroring that back to me. Shame is devastating. I mean, that's probably at the root of most of what I see is people have taken their experiences and they have translated it into, instead of I did something wrong or I did something bad or I, maybe not this way or I made a mistake and I can learn from it. It's no, I am bad. No, I am a mistake. No, I am terrible. This is right.
Yep.
And, then you start missing opportunities because you don't believe in yourself, and then when the door closes and you're all alone, it's like, oh, who am I? It's this empty feeling.
And tons of self-doubt.
Yes.
All of it. And it is debilitating. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up here with you telling me, them, what are some good coping mechanisms? What are some, obviously, go to therapy. I recommend therapy. Like, obviously, that's that's part of why you're here. Is like you need, like, you want the business. You want to be able to help people.
Sure.
That's why you went into doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Obviously, go to therapy. But like, what are some like coping skills that you have found that are highly effective?
So first of all, realizing whose voice is telling you all of these things. I mean, that's one thing. Where did you learn all these things from? Who is telling you that you're not good enough? And where are they coming from? Are they coming from a place of ignorance, right? Is it blissful ignorance? They see you struggling and they don't want for you to struggle and they don't understand. And so they're just hoping to snap you out of it. It's like, is it that or is it malicious? What is it? Try to give some people grace that don't understand, right? They didn't know. But the other piece to that too is don't take on that voice. Don't take it on anymore. So being aware of it is the first thing. Talking about it as another. Therapy is a great way to do it. But I always say that there's power in community. If you can find a safe community, there's lots of resources on Instagram. I know that sounds reckless, but there are a lot of really good qualified people that are talking about ADHD, and you have to find those places. Mel Robbins is a really good one on Instagram. She talks about her own ADHD,
right?
But there are qualified professionals that are giving good information about it, and you can find people that can just really normalize your experience. Be around people that understand. Love yourself. Don't accept crap from other people. Find your tribe. That all this is easier said than done. It's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight.
And finding your tribe's a little bit harder, like in smaller communities as well.
Yeah, but they don't have to be in person.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have to be in person. You can talk to them on Zoom. You were talking about content creators. ADHD Doers is one that I follow.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
They are they're an amazing resource because they draw from multiple sources.
Yep.
They'll take a screenshot of like a video and it's like, oh well, this person talks about ADHD, and they draw from multiple content creators, kind of like a little one-stop shop.
Yeah.
For like all of these speeches, and of course, like then they link those people. It's like, okay, well, you can follow this person. Like if this person speaks to you, then follow this person. Another one, actually a good one for couples. Is ADHD Love. It's this couple from the UK. And it's a neurotypical husband, ADHD wife, and like he'll say what they'll do. One of my favorite things is instead of saying this, and he'll say, "How are you so careless?" and she'll come back with, "Say this." Oh, that must be a real struggle for you. Can I help you with that? Stuff like that.
Wonderful.
So, like being like showing how to be supportive, understanding, hey, we're trying our damnedest.
Yep.
And the energy, and also the other thing too is, you were talking about it, again, back to addiction, the need to take stimulants, because for someone neurodivergent, especially for ADHD, at least from what I've seen, read, heard, experienced myself, it is a lot more exhausting doing day-to-day life, because everything is And I talked about this with my previous interview with Dr. Boy Scout Ben. Doing the dishes isn't just one task.
Right. Yep.
Like each step is a task in and of itself.
Sure.
And then, of course, there are things that you could possibly forget. It's like, okay, well, before I unload before I start washing the dishes here, I need to unload the dishwasher. Okay, I need to unload the dishwasher. Crap. I didn't put the soap in the dishwasher last night. And so now I got to wait 3 hours while the dishes are washing, and then I go back into it. And by that time, I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I just lost the motivation to do it.
Yep, exactly.
And it's typical stuff like that, whereas like I can build a room like this, but I can't do the damn dishes.
Right.
So, but again, getting that voice out of your head.
Yeah, and just, and remembering too that it isn't a deficit, right?
Right.
People that have ADHD are very similar to people that have anxiety, similar to people who are highly sensitive people. We take in sensory information a lot faster and we take in more. I'm a highly sensitive person, so I can identify with way too much, way too soon, right? We don't start out the day with less. Never. We never start out the day with less. We all start out the day with the same. But our cups fill up quicker because we're taking in more information. That's not a fault. That is the way that our brains are wired. And when we learn to see it that way as, hey, this is just the way that my brain is, it's not a fault. Unfortunately, society has told me that it is, but it isn't. And we see it that way. It's like, okay, I'm going to get filled up quicker. Too much is going on. I'm going to reach my capacity sooner. And you plan for that. Don't try to be like everybody else. That's the other thing. If you're a neurodivergent living in a neurotypical world, which we all are, it's not ever going to work. It just isn't.
No. And we're finding that out more and more.
Yes.
It's, like we need, and the thing is like, it's not fair for us though to place the burden on, like I say burden's a bad word, but place the responsibility on society to completely accommodate us.
Absolutely.
Like it's all about communication. It's like, okay, this is what I need.
Boundaries. This is what I can have. This is what I know. This is what exhausts me. This is where I reach my capacity. This is what I'm able to do. Education around what's going on with you. That's how therapy can help. That's why finding a community can help because you can say, hey, how do I go about this? What do I do? What do I say? Look, reading the information about the relationships. That's a wonderful way to learn, and you curate your own experience.
And if you're working somewhere where it's like, oh well, no, you're just being lazy. You're giving me excuses. No, I'm telling you why this is like this. Oh well, you're just using it as an excuse to get Adderall to do this. You're using it as an excuse to not work. No, I want to work. I want to work here. This is what is difficult for me. This is why it is difficult for me. If they can't accept that, if a workplace, for one, bipolar disorder and ADHD are actually classified under ADA.
So is addiction.
And so is addiction. It's classified under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if your workplace is unwilling to accommodate for you, for one, find a new place to work.
Yeah, if possible.
If possible.
Yes. And if you've got an ADHD brain, you probably have an entrepreneurial brain.
Yes. And work for yourself.
Yeah.
Sounds
so easy, but something to work towards.
Yeah. Totally work for yourself.
Yeah, just quit your job.
And take out a loan for large amounts of money that you'll totally not impulsively spend on stuff you don't need. But it is a challenge. But entrepreneurial, being a teacher is also a big one. Didn't work out for me so much.
Right.
But like entrepreneur, that definitely helps. It will be a struggle. It's always going to be a struggle.
Yep.
And as soon as you face the reality that it will be a struggle,
yes,
you're
your best advocate.
You're your own best advocate.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, Stephanie Butler, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you
for being a part of this podcast, and hope to talk to you again sometime.
Absolutely, anytime.
There's a bunch of stuff that we could possibly go over.
Oh, yeah. I'm a chatty Cathy. I could definitely talk it up.
And that is it for the very first ever Dose of Johnny C podcast. I want to thank Boy Scout Ben. I want to thank Stephanie Butler from Clarity on the Coast. Again, you can check out Clarity on the Coast. She has a bunch of Instagram videos, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels. You can check out all of her content. Just do a search for Clarity on the Coast. Again, thank you, Stephanie, for being the official mental health advocate and expert for the Dose of Johnny C podcast. Our next episode is going to be talking about anti-intellectualism, and I'm going to be talking with Boy Scout Ben again, and also Diane Frazier, the director of the Emerald Coast Science Center in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. We're going to be talking about anti-intellectualism and how to get people into science, into research, into facts. So if you want to check that out, that podcast will be dropping on Monday, September 18th. So be sure to check that out. My name is Johnny C. This podcast has been powered by Ace 50 Media. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you later.